5.2's Spiral Abyss is terrible. Genuinely one of the worst abysses that Genshin has ever put together, so we need to talk about it. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. The Abyss has been progressively getting harder and harder over time. It's becoming very noticeable. You can make the argument that yes, power is obviously scaling upwards over time. Compare the enemies in the 1.0 Abyss to now. The difference is night and day. Enemy rotations have to be different, right? Yes, well, this recent jump in difficulty is kind of absurd. You see, this was actually something that I feared when I realized that all the not long characters that we've gotten so far have been really good. The Abyss would then scale to match that level of quality. Fontaine was a region which was chock full of good units. However, even the absolute worst bosses were quite manageable. Notlan stepped it up to a whole other level. This Abyss is genuinely, wholeheartedly, one of the worst in Genshin's history. I haven't met a single soul yet who played through this reset and said that it was fair and balanced. Sure, it's balanced if your definition of balanced is an ant with one leg. It's the most frustrating nonsense in the world. I understand that they want to push the banner units, but this is taking it a bit too far. Novelette is the best DPS in the game, therefore, let's add a whole bunch of annoying bosses that will utterly knock your socks off. Zhongli is an impressive shielder, so we need to make the Tenebrous Papilla an insane creature which knocks you over the same way that a cat knocks glass objects off of a table. The Krukosaur is nigh impossible without our beloved Lady Farina. Sure, she does indeed have one of the highest ownership rates as recorded on any website which tracks that kind of stuff, but newer players may have missed her banners in favor of other characters. Popular? Sure, as she should be. We all love Lady Farina in this household. Yet even so, how are non-Farina havers meant to comfortably deal with this thing? I've noticed that Chaska makes this thing a breeze. She'll whittle down its shield super quickly, and her aerial combat style suits her to killing the boss excellently. And while it's nice against the Golden Wolf Lord, oh my goodness, you have to sacrifice the fourth bullet always being guaranteed in favor of bringing a Geo character, because otherwise, good luck dealing any damage to that thing. Yes, you are forced to play her handicapped if you want your full continuous run to go well. Just great. And the Tenebrous Papilla? This thing will either totally nuke you before you can fill up its stun bar, or you will stun it, get some damage in while it's down, then experience your sanity falling into the Abyss in real time as you struggle to escape its excessively violent attacks. It hits stupidly hard for no reason. Incredibly artificial way to bring shielders back into the meta. The Abyss has progressively been getting worse and worse as time has went on. Sure, however, it was nothing that we couldn't manage, but this? Yeah, it's something, I'll say that much. Hoyoverse themselves said that they wouldn't focus too much on Genshin's endgame due to potentially causing excessive anxiety. Really now, making a separate mode where all of the bosses are insane nonsense like this would be far less stressful than shoving them all into one Abyss in my opinion. To be fair, I do generally enjoy that Abyss is harder on the whole now. We do want a degree of difficulty here, but this is just frustrating. Horrible enemy lineup. My hypothesis is simple. Hoyo created the Imaginarium Theater as the game's new easy endgame. The most you have to do is level up your characters and hope for the best, because even in the game's hardest mode, the enemies aren't particularly tough. You can reach the bar to clearing over time once you've built enough units. Therefore, free reign to make the Abyss as horrendous as humanly possible, right? I was generally fine with the Abyss, since I appreciated that the HP inflation and enemy lineups weren't too rough. I play the three other big gacha games for reference: Honkai Star Rail, ZZZ, and Wuthering Waves. I'd like to use Honkai Star Rail as an example here. Keeping up with the meta in that game is infuriating because of how rabid HP inflation is. The bias towards new characters is super clear in every new endgame mode that refreshes, and it drives me nuts. I actually really enjoy the endgame modes in Honkai Star Rail, which is a big reason as to why I play that game, but holy heck, the power creep makes it kind of exhausting to keep up with the meta. Let my character be good for longer than 3 patches, I beg of you. Genshin, please don't go down this route as well. The route that they're taking so far is bound to result in some of the worst characters being borderline unable to clear at the end of the day. If you don't play Honkai Star Rail, let me put it into perspective for you. Kinich came out in 5.0, yes? If this were Honkai Star Rail, he'd have already been replaced by somebody else next patch. Thankfully, we aren't at that stage of Genshin. We're nowhere near that sort of terror, in fact. But Hoyo, please, instead of excessive HP inflation, just add more Abyss floors. Giving everyone 1 to 2 extra pulls through Abyss rewards isn't gonna kill you, and considering how terrible the current Abyss is, you'd have to play for quite a few months before managing to clear comfortably. Even just making a boss rush game mode for this type of content to keep it out of the Abyss would be nice. But to be honest, it's not even like the structure of the Abyss is the key issue here, it's the enemy design. Tenebra's Papilla crashes into you over and over and over again, giving you barely any time to react or dodge. The only character that actually feels comfortable up against this thing is Kinich and Neuvillette. Both of those lads are able to keep their distance. Most of our characters feel garbage up against this thing. I know that they tend to jack up the difficulty of certain bosses from the overworld into the Abyss, but like, come on! It shifts forms like once every time that you blink. Yes, I would rather have a boss which reacts to me as opposed to a nerd like the Ruined Serpent which digs itself underground half the time, or the abomination that is Dwenet. However, this isn't just hard, it's simply plain annoying. I know that you can very easily sum up this entire rant with skill issue. To that I say, sure, fair enough. However, the fact that nobody liked this Abyss should indeed count for something. I'm also somebody with a pretty kitted out account. I have roughly 90% of the characters in this game if I were to make an educated guess, many of which are highly invested, constellated, and are within the current meta. Yet even so, I still found this Abyss to be kind of annoying when trying to play different types of teams against it. The anxiety doesn't come from the endgame content being hard, it comes from it being borderline unfair. Listen, I quite like myself some difficult games from time to time. My favorite game of all time is Hollow Knight. Absolute Radiance is a difficult fight. However, it also happens to be a very fair fight. If you lose, that is literally just because you suck and you need to get good. Fair, difficult fights are much more interesting than character checks, and this Abyss is the weirdest character check ever. I understand that it's a game mode made with the specific intent of selling the characters on banners in mind, but even with that being in mind, you have historically been able to deal with most bosses through clever workarounds. Okay, I can call this Abyss horrible all I want, but some actual changes need to be proposed. First of all, the Krukosaur shouldn't fly around the place. Keep it grounded so that melee hydros like Yolan and Xingqiu can shield break it more easily. The clear Farina bias is crazy. Secondly, we need some actual time to react to the Papilla's transformations. It shapeshifts at a ridiculous speed that is very hard to keep up with. It shouldn't literally two-shot you without a shield either, and that's another thing. Golden Wolf Lord? Why? When Chaska is one of the best answers to the Krukosaur? Okay, yes, Neuvillette banner, and it encourages the use of Shieldon and Zhongli, but Zhongli's a shielder. Who said that the Wolf Lord had to get involved? Dude, that borderline doesn't even make any sense, because Rift Towns were infamously introduced to poison you even through shields. I don't quite get the marketing strat here. It's restrictive in ways that don't make any sense either. Eon Blight Drake on 1232? Why? Ah yes, let's slap in the boss, which shills bow characters despite both of the current limited 5-star reruns not being bow users. Neuvillette has a great range to be fair, but it still ends up feeling like a weird choice. Using S-tier pyro DPSs such as Arlecchino and Linny feel awful on the first half too, thanks to the Krukosaur and Lava avatars. You have to remove some of these restrictions. It's such a frustrating character check that a lot of people quite simply won't be able to deal with. I understand that the Abyss has to scale upwards because then the enemies would seem like pushovers when put up against their powerful collection of meta characters. If I could remove one enemy from this Abyss, it would be the Tenebra's Papilla. Such a dumb boss. Either nerf it or show it the door, because I haven't a clue as to what Hoyoverse was trying to shield here with that thing. Isn't it more partial to not-long characters anyway? Yes, perfect. Time to slap in this boss, right when we have no not-long units on banners. Makes all the sense in the world, sure buddy. The Abyss has steadily been rising and rising in total HP count over time, with enemy mechanics only becoming more and more frustrating. At this rate, I'm genuinely not sure as to when things are gonna calm down inflation-wise, if things are even planning to calm down. So I think it's safe to say that the Abyss is indeed getting worse. Hoyo cranked things up from 0 to 100 way too fast. They have always handled things very slowly power creep-wise, and while speeding things up a little is fine, nobody is asking you to follow in the footsteps of the Memory of Chaos Hoyoverse. Less character checks and more actual boss mechanics which anybody can interact with. That's what we really need. The best way to describe this Abyss? I'll tell you all a little story. Once upon a time, I was a kid doing random battles on Pokemon X and Y. I had a Giratina, which I got from GTSing a random level 100 Kongashkan that I daycared up for the sake of getting legendaries. I gave a lad a Gricius Orb, and I had a blast cooking everybody on random singles. However, this one nerd brought along his stall Clefable. Easy, I said as I tried to Giratina it into oblivion. Yeah, no cigar. That thing made me mold into oblivion as they built up buffs over numerous turns, and I continued to spam offensive moves because I was a brainless kid with no actual strategic knowledge. Then I eventually had my whole legendary team swept by some darn pink thing, is that new stored power. Stored power, my behated. There are a few amount of times where I have molded as hard as I did on that day. This lovely Abyss reset has given me the pleasure of understanding that long-lost ancient frustration again. Clefable designed this Abyss, I will not be thinking otherwise. Definitely let me know what you thought about this Abyss down below in the comments. Was it that bad for you, or did you find it alright? I'm curious to know. Friendly reminder that I've got a ZZZ second channel. Go head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some silly, fun ZZZ content. Hopefully this video was able to tell you why the Spiral Abyss is getting worse, and why this particular one needs to be executed. This has been Juice, signing out, and I'm adding the 5.2/3 Abyss reset to my list of the worst things ever.